The clock on the mantel counted down the hours with a kind of mocking regularity. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Before it was just background, now every click echoes in my temples. It's been a week. Exactly 7 days since Iris had been gone. 168 hours of loneliness in a house where every corner is saturated with her. The box of photographs is heavy, dark wood with a worn lid. Iris always put the pictures in there saying, "Garland, in the digital age, you have to keep something tangible." I go through the cards with trembling fingers. 75 years old, damn senile hands, damn time. In the 15-year-old photo, we're standing by Ferguson Lake. It's about 20 miles from Warrensburg. Iris is wearing a straw hat that was blown around by the wind, and she was always holding it up. I wasn't so gray and wrinkled then. I smiled, holding her by the waist. The simple happiness of simple people. "Paxton wasn't always like this," I said out loud, as if Iris might hear. "When Elaine was alive, he was a different boy. Memories of the first wife always come unsolicited. There's a fine line between past and present. I love Iris, have loved her all these 20 years, but that doesn't mean I've forgotten Elaine. Paxton never understood that. To him, my new life was a betrayal." Here's a picture of my wedding to Iris. A modest ceremony, just a few guests. Paxton was 30 at the time. He only came because Lauren, his wife, insisted. He stood there stone-faced, didn't say a word of congratulations. I saw Iris trying to talk to him, holding out a glass of champagne. He turned his back and left before we cut the cake. And this is our trip to Pittsburgh about 10 years ago. We were visiting Iris's sister Dottie. A simple trip, nothing special, but for some reason this particular picture makes me clench my teeth to keep from howling in pain. Iris is standing in front of some historic building, her graying red hair gathered in a careless bun, her eyes squinting against the sun. She laughs, and I remember that moment. I remember thinking at the time, "God, I'm so lucky." I put the photo aside. It's time to stop this torture. But I can't tear myself away. I keep going through the cards as if it were my salvation. The last few months have been a living hell. The diagnosis sounded like a judgment. Stage 4, liver and bone metastases, prognosis months at best. Iris took the news with a strange calmness, much easier than I did. She was the one who reassured me, stroked my arm and said, "Garland, life doesn't last forever, and I'm grateful for our years." How can you be so strong in the face of death? I couldn't. When it got really bad and she was moved to hospice, I came every day. I sat next to her, held her hand, read her favorite books aloud. The nurses already knew me by name, brought an extra chair, sometimes even a cup of tea. "You're so devoted," one of them said. Betty, I think. Devoted? That's ridiculous. I just loved my wife. Iris was melting before my eyes. First, she lost her hair from the chemo, then her weight. By the end, all that was left was a shadow of the woman who laughed in that photo in Pittsburgh. But the eyes stayed the same. Sometimes, when the pain receded, she would look at me and smile. I saw in that look our whole life. On the last day, she barely regained consciousness. She dozed, sometimes mumbled something. I sat beside her, holding her hand as usual. So cold, with veins bulging. Suddenly she opened her eyes, looking at me clearly as if the sickness had receded for a moment. "Garland," she said, "don't let Paxton take away your right to say goodbye." I didn't know what she meant then. I thought it was the ravings of a dying woman. I kissed her on the forehead, promised her everything would be all right. She closed her eyes and never woke up again. She died quietly, in her sleep, at dawn. I sat by her side, not letting go of her hand until the nurse came in. Paxton called me a couple hours after she died. Cold, formal tone. "I'm organizing the funeral," he said. "You don't have to worry." I was too shattered to object. Iris's death had drained me of all my strength, all my will. He said the ceremony would be in 3 days, at the town chapel. I just nodded, unable to argue. Something inside me told me not to trust him, but grief clouded my judgment. The hospice nurse called the next day, offering her condolences, asked if everything was all right with the funeral, said her son had stopped by to pick up Iris's personal belongings, looked very businesslike. I thanked her and hung up. Didn't even ask what kind of things he'd taken. I didn't care. A few days passed like a blur. I hardly ate, slept lightly, mostly in the chair because I couldn't get into our bed. Sometimes the phone rang, but I didn't answer it. It's funny how quickly a person turns into a wreck if there's no reason to hang on. On the 6th day, I woke up to the doorbell ringing, insistent, loud. I made my way to the front door, opened it. Edith, our neighbor, was standing there with a pot of soup. "For God's sake, Garland, have you looked in the mirror?" she asked instead of greeting me, pushing her way into the house. Edith was the kind of old maid who felt it her duty to look after everyone around her, sarcastic but kind at heart. Iris and I often had her over for Sunday lunches. "You should eat," she said, heading for the kitchen, "and shave. Iris wouldn't want to see you like this." I followed her obediently, unable to object. "I saw your Paxton yesterday," she said, warming the soup. "At City Hall. So busy, so important. Didn't even say hello, though. He sure noticed me." "He's always like that," I said, sitting down at the table. "Especially now that he's become deputy mayor." "You should call him, find out about the funeral," Edith said, putting a plate in front of me. "People say all sorts of things." "What do they say?" I asked, mechanically bringing the spoon to my mouth. "Well," she faltered, "Martha at the florist said she's placing an order for tomorrow, for your Iris's funeral, but you said the ceremony was in 3 days, didn't you?" I froze with a spoon in the air. Something inside moved as if waking from a long sleep. Anger. A sharp, burning anger. "Are you sure?" I asked, feeling my heart start to beat faster. "Martha wouldn't lie," Edith shrugged. "She said Paxton had ordered white lilies. A basket. Expensive ones, by the way. Iris hated lilies. She thought they were too pretentious, too funereal. She liked simple wildflowers, daisies, cornflowers. We used to go to the country and she'd pick bouquets." "Edith, would you mind calling Martha right now?" I asked, pushing my plate away. "Just to get the details?" She nodded, pulling her cell phone out of her purse. I listened to their conversation, feeling an icy rage building inside. Martha confirmed that Iris Thorpe's funeral was tomorrow, 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the city chapel. The order was placed by Paxton Thorpe, paid for in cash. "That bastard," I hissed when Edith hung up. "He lied to me on purpose. He doesn't want me at his own wife's funeral." Edith looked at me with concern. "Garland, maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe there was a change of plans and they forgot to tell you." I shook my head. Knew my son better than anyone. This was deliberate. A continuation of years of war. "Thanks for the soup, Edith," I said, rising. "You're a true friend. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some calls to make." She left, concerned but understanding. I stood by the phone for a long time, collecting my thoughts. I could have called Paxton directly, made a scene, but it wouldn't have done any good. He'd deny it, play it cool, and then do it his way. No, there had to be another plan. I dialed my grandson's number. Dexter, Paxton's son, was always closer to me than his father. Maybe because I didn't push him, didn't demand perfection in everything like Paxton did. Maybe because I taught him how to fish and play chess. Or maybe it was just because I saw him as a good kid, despite his father's attempts to mold him into a copy of himself. "Grandpa?" There was surprise in his voice. "You okay?" "I've been better," I said honestly. "Look, Dex, I need the truth. Grandma Iris's funeral's tomorrow?" Silence on the phone. Long, heavy. Finally, he sighed. "Damn it, Grandpa. I was just about to call you. So it's true, I said. Your father went behind my back. He said he told you. Dexter sounded confused. He said that you refused to come because you were in too much pain. I grinned bitterly. Typical Paxton, turning everything inside out. Grandfather, Dexter continued, his voice low as if he was afraid of being overheard. There's something fishy going on. He's fussing over this funeral like a madman. Picked out the coffin himself, made the arrangements with the chapel. He even insisted that the coffin be closed. He says it's best for everyone. Iris wanted an open casket. We discussed it when it was clear the end was near. She said, I want people to see me for the last time. Don't be afraid, I won't look scary. Ask them to put some blush on. What time tomorrow? I asked, feeling my hands clench into fists. 2:00, City Chapel, Dexter answered. Grandfather, I don't know what it is with you and your father, but this isn't right. It's your wife's funeral, and you should be there. I will be, I said firmly. And thank you for telling the truth. We talked some more. Dexter told me that after the funeral there's supposed to be a reading of the will at the town notary's office. Paxton's all over Iris's will, even though she's nobody to him. But I know the son. He always thought he was entitled to everything. Thought she might have left something to his kids or the charity he runs. Typical Paxton, always looking to make a profit. I hung up the phone and sat still for a long time. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of love, arguments, reconciliations, breakfasts and dinners together, vacations and ordinary days. And Paxton wanted to take away my right to say goodbye to her. Don't let Paxton take away your right to say goodbye, I remembered Iris's last words. She knew. Somehow she had seen this coming. I stood up, feeling a strange determination. For the first time in a week I was ready to act. I had to call Percy Crimble, my old friend and lawyer. If anyone could help me stand up to Paxton, it was him. But first, a shower, a shave and clean clothes. Iris wouldn't want to see me like this. After Dexter called, I immediately tried Paxton, dialed his number over and over, but he didn't answer. I sent a text saying, I know about the funeral tomorrow. We need to talk. It's Reed. No answer. Damn son of a bitch, even now he's still playing his games. I went out on the porch to clear my head. It was a warm June evening with a light breeze. Iris loved such evenings. Often she sat in the rocking chair that still stands here, with a book and a glass of iced tea. Sometimes we'd just sit together in silence, watching the sky darken. Now the rocking chair is empty and the silence is deafening. Back in the house, I tried calling my son again, to no avail. Rage roiled inside, making it hard to breathe. How dare he? What right did he have to take away my farewell to Iris? The solution came naturally. Percy Crimble. We've been friends since college, though our paths have diverged since. He became a successful lawyer. I became a simple postal clerk. But our friendship has stood the test of time and status. When Elaine died, it was Percy who helped me with the paperwork, the insurance, the inheritance. When I married Iris, he was my best man. He retired 5 years ago, but he still worked part-time as a counselor. I found his number in a notebook, an old-fashioned paper notebook with worn corners. Iris had given it to me for my 60th birthday, saying that in the world of electronics, you had to have something reliable. Garland? His voice sounded surprised. It's good to hear from you, old boy. Percy, I need your help, I said without preamble. Iris died a week ago. Silence in the receiver. Then, Jesus, Garland, I'm so sorry. Why didn't you call sooner? I was out of it, I admitted. But now there's another problem. Paxton's organizing the funeral tomorrow without telling me. Lied about the date. Percy swore. He knew my son well. He has no right to keep you out of his own wife's funeral, he said firmly. It's illegal and immoral. What am I to do, Percy? I asked, feeling my voice shaking. I have to be there. I must say goodbye to her. "You will be," he answered confidently. "I'll come for you tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We'll go to the chapel together. If Paxton tries to keep you out, I'll be there. As your legal representative." Something inside me has calmed down. With Percy, I could handle it. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was someone who knew my family's history. "Thank you, friend," I said sincerely. "You're welcome," he replied. "Now tell me what happened. From the beginning." I told him everything. About Iris's illness, about the last days in hospice, about Paxton's call, about how I'd learned the truth. My voice was breaking, but I forced myself to speak. Percy listened without interrupting. "Garland," he said when I was done, "I know this is hard for you, but there's something else we need to talk about. Did Iris leave a will?" I wondered. "We talked to her about it, of course. She insisted that we both make wills." "You never know what's going to happen, Garland. It's best to be prepared." Her foresight sometimes annoyed me, but more often I was grateful for it. "Yes," I replied. "Through the Baxter law firm, about 3 years ago." "Good," Percy said. "Then, after the funeral, we'll go to the reading of the will. You, as the legal spouse, have every right to attend." When we finished talking, I was relieved. The plan was in place. Percy would help. I'll be able to say goodbye to Iris tomorrow despite Paxton's best efforts. I made my way to the bedroom, opened the closet. A black suit hung on the rack, the same one I'd worn to my mother's funeral 5 years ago. Iris had helped me with my tie then, her slender fingers deftly tying the knot. "Imagine just going to church on Sunday," she said then, trying to distract me from my grief. "Now, I'm going to bury her." After picking out a shirt and tie, I put everything on the chair in the corner. Tomorrow I'll say goodbye to her, whether Paxton wants me to or not. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about Iris, about how she'd come into my life. We met at the library where she worked. I'd come in looking for a book on gardening. I wanted to start a vegetable garden in the backyard to keep my hands and head busy after Elaine died. Iris helped me find the literature I needed, and a week later, when I returned for more books, offered me a cup of coffee. "You look like you could use a break," she said then. Our romance developed slowly, cautiously. We were both not young, both carrying the weight of the past. Her, a failed marriage that had ended in divorce 20 years earlier. Me, the death of my wife from a sudden heart attack. We weren't looking for passion, more like understanding, acceptance, a safe harbor. When I told Paxton I was going to remarry, he reacted as if I'd told him I'd killed someone. "So soon?" His face contorted with anger. "Mom's only been dead 2 years." "2 years is not a short time, son," I replied then. "And Iris is no substitute for your mother. No one can replace Elaine." "Then why?" He was almost shouting. "Why would you do that? You can live alone, I'll help you. Or move in with us. We'll find a place." "I don't want to be alone," I said simply. "And I don't want to be a burden to you and Lauren." "Did you ever think that this, Iris, might be after your money?" he blurted out. I laughed then. I had no money except for a small pension and the house I'd inherited from my parents. Iris didn't earn any more than I did, but enough to live decently. "Paxton," I said, trying to speak calmly, "I'm asking you to respect my choices. I loved your mother until the last day of her life, and I will love her always. But I don't want to spend the rest of my life alone." He left with a slammed door. He only showed up at our small wedding because Lauren insisted, and then the Cold War started. He didn't invite us to family gatherings. He didn't call. He didn't visit. Iris tried to patch things up, sending cards for grandchildren's birthdays, Christmas presents, all to no avail. Dexter, his oldest son, became a bridge between us. He would sneak over, help with the computer, listen to my war stories, learn to play chess. Iris baked chocolate chip cookies for him, his favorite. "He's a good boy," she said, "not stale like his father." I rolled over onto my side. looking at the empty half of the bed. Strangely, I didn't feel her presence here. Maybe because she'd spent the last few weeks in hospice care. Maybe because her things were still in their places, as if she'd just stepped out for a bit and would be back soon. As the years went by, Paxton made a career in local government. First clerk, then manager, now deputy mayor. Power had changed him, made him colder, more calculating. He didn't even try to pretend to care about me anymore. When Iris got sick, he didn't call, he didn't come. Dexter was the only one who stopped by, asking what he could do to help. Now that she's gone, Paxton has suddenly stepped up. Why would he want to organize a funeral behind my back? What was he trying to hide? Or was this just another way to hurt me? I got out of bed, walked to the kitchen. I made tea, a habit I picked up from Iris. She always said tea helped calm my nerves. Garland, have some tea and everything will fall into place. If only it were that simple. Sitting at the kitchen table, I remembered Iris trying to patch things up with Paxton. I remember one day she'd baked an apple pie, his favorite, I'd told her, and taken it to their house. She came back with red eyes. "He didn't answer the door," she said quietly. "Saw me through the window, but he didn't open it. I was furious, wanted to go to him, to make a scandal. She stopped me. 'Don't, Garland. It will only make things worse. Give him time.'" Time. We'd given him 20 years, and nothing has changed. And now he wants to take away my ability to say goodbye to the woman who tried to be his friend despite all his rejection. Don't let Paxton take away your right to say goodbye. Iris's last words kept me on my toes. She knew he was capable of this. She saw it coming. When it started to get light outside my window, I made a decision. I'm going to that funeral. And if Paxton tries to stop me, he'll have to deal not only with me, but with Percy, and the truth about what kind of son he's been all these years. I showered, shaved, put on a fresh shirt, shined my shoes. Iris always paid attention to shoes. "You can tell a real gentleman by his shoes," she'd say with a smile. Around noon, I dialed Percy's number to make sure our plan was on track. "I'll be at your place at 1 o'clock, he confirmed. "Be ready for a little battle, Garland. Paxton won't just back down." "I know," I replied, "and I won't back down either." After the call, I sat down in the chair where I had spent most of my time the last few days. My gaze fell on the picture on the wall Iris and I in the park about 10 years ago. She's laughing with her head tilted back, and I'm holding her hand, smiling. Serene times. The memories come flooding back. Our first vacation together, a trip to the lakes upstate. We rented a small cabin on the shore, spent our days hiking in the woods, our evenings by the fire. Iris read aloud and I listened, staring at the fire. Her voice was soft, with a slight huskiness, especially when she was tired. "You know, Garland," she said to me then, "I've always dreamed of a life like this, simple, quiet, with a man who sees the real me." I saw her fears, her joys, her little quirks, like the way she folded newspapers by date, or her habit of humming when she thought no one could hear. Saw how she cried over sad movies and how fiercely she defended what she believed in. Saw her whole and loved every bit of her. And now Paxton wants to deny me the chance to say one last goodbye to her, to spend my last moments by her side before the earth forever hides her from me. The ringing of the doorbell interrupted my musings. I glanced at the clock. It was only 12. Early for Percy. Maybe Dexter had decided to stop by. Or, God forbid, Paxton had come to his senses. When I opened the door, I saw Lauren, Paxton's wife. She looked tense, fidgeting nervously with the strap of her purse. "Garland," she said instead of greeting, "may I come in?" I stepped back, letting her into the house. We hadn't seen each other in years, though we talked on the phone occasionally, usually when she called to see if I had Dexter. "I heard you knew about the funeral," she said, walking into the living room. Dexter blurted it out. "Yes," I answered, crossing my arms over my chest. And I'll be there, whether Paxton wants me there or not. She sighed, sinking into a chair. Garland, he's doing what he thinks is right, in his own way. Right? I felt my anger rising. Denying me the chance to say goodbye to my wife is the right thing to do? He doesn't think you deserve it, she said quietly. After you left his mother to die, I froze. This is it. That's what Paxton's been accusing me of all these years. I didn't abandon Elaine, I said, feeling my voice shake. I was there for her. I performed CPR, cardiac massage. I called an ambulance, but it was too late. I know, Lauren nodded. But that's not what Paxton thinks. He was there, Garland. Saw you panicking. Couldn't remember the number of the ambulance. How you screamed instead of acting. I slumped down on the couch, feeling my legs wobbling. Yes, I was panicking. Who wouldn't panic after seeing the woman they love fall to the floor, clutching her chest? Yes, I didn't immediately remember the number. Yes, I screamed. I called for help, but I did the best I could. He was a kid, Lauren, I said tiredly. A teenager. Of course, he didn't think I'd done enough for his mother. He's a grown man now, she replied. But that resentment, that anger, hasn't gone away. And when you married Iris so soon after Elaine's death, it was a betrayal to him. 2 years isn't that soon, I countered. And I never stopped loving Elaine. I just found room in my heart for Iris too. Lauren looked at me sadly. I know, Garland, and I've tried to explain that to Paxton, but he won't listen. There's only black and white for him. You either love his mother and are loyal to her, or you're a traitor. We were silent for a while. Then she stood up. I came to tell you that if you show up at the funeral, there will be a scandal, she said. Paxton is determined. He believes Iris destroyed your family, and he won't let you desecrate your mother's memory by attending this funeral. Desecrate? I felt the blood rush to my face. This is my wife we're talking about, Lauren. 20 years together, 20 years of love, care, support. And he wants to take away my right to say goodbye to her. He's already organized everything, she said, heading for the door. There will be guards. They won't let you in. We'll see, I said, straightening up. I have a plan too, and friends. She stopped at the door, looking at me with a strange expression, either pity or respect. You know, Garland, I always thought you were a good man, and Iris was a good woman. I'm sorry about what happened. After she left, I sat back in my chair. So, Paxton's ready for war. Well, so am I. I'm not going to let him take away my goodbye to Iris, not after all we've been through. Percy arrived at exactly 1 o'clock, as promised. Seeing my face, he frowned. What happened? I told him about Lauren's visit, about Paxton hiring guards to keep me out of the funeral. What a bastard, Percy muttered. But it doesn't make any difference, Garland. We're going anyway. Are you sure? I asked. There could be a fight, a scandal. Iris wouldn't want that. Iris would want you there, Percy said firmly. And we'll do everything we can to make it happen. No fights if possible. But you have every right to attend your wife's funeral, and no Paxton and his guards can stop that. I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. Percy was right. Iris would have wanted me there. Her last words had been exactly that. Then let's go, I said, rising. It's time to show my son that I can fight too. The Warrensburg City Chapel was a small white building with stained glass windows and a modest bell tower. I've been here many times, weddings, christenings, funerals, but I never thought I'd be burying Iris here. When Percy and I pulled up, there were several cars in the parking lot. I recognized Lauren's silver sedan, Paxton's black SUV, Dexter's older Ford. A few other cars probably belonged to Iris's friends from the library and neighbors. Ready? Percy asked, turning off the engine. I nodded, feeling my throat go dry. Am I ready? Am I ready to see the woman I'd lived with for 20 years for the last time? Am I ready for my own son to try to stop me from doing so? Stay close to me, Percy said, as if he'd read my mind. "Whatever happens, remember that we're here to say goodbye to Iris. Don't let Paxton provoke you." We got out of the car. The day was clear, sunny, with a slight breeze, the kind of day Iris liked to work in the garden. She used to say that days like this made you feel closer to heaven. At the entrance to the chapel stood a stout man in a black suit, clearly not a guest. A guard hired by Paxton. He gave us an appraising look. "Names?" he asked in a formal tone. "Garland Thorpe," I answered, straightening up. "The deceased's husband." His eyes widened slightly, but his face remained impassive. "I've been ordered not to let you in, Mr. Thorpe," he said, blocking the entrance. "Please leave." "And who gave that order?" Percy intervened, stepping forward. "Percy Crimble, Mr. Thorpe's lawyer." "Mr. Paxton Thorpe," the guard replied, tensing slightly. "He's organizing the funeral, and he's determined not to let the deceased's husband attend." Percy shook his head. "That's illegal, young man. And if you prevent Mr. Thorpe from attending his wife's funeral, we will sue both you personally and your security firm." The guard hesitated, clearly unprepared for this turn of events. "I'm just following orders," he said uncertainly. "Follow the law, not illegal orders," Percy cut him off. "Now step back, please. We're late for the ceremony." To my surprise, the guard backed away. Apparently, the threat of a lawsuit had worked, or maybe he just realized the absurdity of the situation. Inside the chapel, it was cool and quiet. Several rows of pews, most already occupied. An altar decorated with white lilies, a flower Iris couldn't stand. And the coffin, closed, just like Dexter had said. Dark wood, gleaming in the candlelight. In that box lies Iris. The woman who had laughed with me, cried with me, shared her life with me for 20 years. I felt a lump rise to my throat. People turned around as we passed. Some nodded, some averted their eyes. I saw Iris's colleagues from the library, Martha Higgins, Grace Lawrence. They smiled weakly at me. Neighbors. Edith waved her hand. And in the front row, Paxton and his family. He didn't turn around, but I could see by the tense back that he was aware of my presence. Percy and I sat in the last row. I felt my hands shake and I clenched them into fists. No time for weakness. Not here, not now. The ceremony began. Pastor Wilson, an older man with kind eyes, began to speak about Iris, about her kindness, about her service to the community as a librarian. He spoke good, proper words, but they seemed empty to me. This man barely knew my wife, didn't know how she liked her morning cinnamon coffee, how she dreaded thunderstorms, how she frowned when reading something complicated, didn't know the real Iris. After the pastor, Martha, the library director, spoke. She talked about how Iris organized a reading program for disadvantaged children and how she helped the elderly learn the computer. "She was the heart of our library," Martha said with tears in her voice, "and a piece of that heart will stay with each of us." Then Paxton came up. I tensed. What could he say about Iris? He'd barely interacted with her. "Iris Thorpe came into our family when I was an adult," he began in a formal tone. "Our relationship wasn't always easy, but today I want to honor a woman who was an important part of my father's life." He spoke smoothly, emotionless, as if he were reading out a report at work. Not a word about how he'd ignored her all these years, how he'd rejected all her attempts at a relationship. Hypocrite. When the official part of the ceremony was over, the pastor invited those who wished to come up to the casket to say goodbye. People began to stand up, forming a line. I stood up, intending to do the same. Then Paxton noticed me. His face contorted with anger. He came up quickly, blocking my way. "You!" he hissed. "How dare you come?" "This is my wife, Paxton," I answered, trying to speak calmly. "I have a right to say goodbye to her." "You don't deserve to be here. Go away." His voice rose, drawing the attention of the others. "You don't deserve to stand by her coffin." Paxton, Lauren intervened, coming over to us. Not here, please. No, he waved her away. I will not let him desecrate this ceremony. He left my mother to die, and now he's come to pretend to love this woman? Percy put his hand on my shoulder, holding me back. I could feel the blood pounding in my temples. Mr. Thorpe, Percy addressed Paxton in a formal tone, your father has a legal right to attend his wife's funeral. Moreover, after the ceremony, there will be a reading of the deceased's will, where his presence is required as the principal heir. Heir? Paxton grinned. She had nothing. We'll find that out at the reading of the will, Percy said calmly. For now, I strongly advise you to step back and let your father say goodbye to his wife. Otherwise, I'll have to file a complaint for obstruction of a funeral ceremony, which is a violation of state law. Paxton turned black, but backed off. I saw Dexter looking at us from the back row, a mixture of embarrassment and relief. I walked over to the casket, closed against Iris's wishes, put my hand on the polished wood, cold, smooth, nothing like the warmth of a living person. Goodbye, my dear, I whispered. Thank you for 20 years of happiness. I felt tears on my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. Let everyone see. Let Paxton see that I really loved her. After the ceremony, people started to leave. Some came up to me, offering their condolences. Martha hugged me, whispering, "She loved you so much, Garland. Always said you were the best thing that ever happened in her life." Percy came up to me when the chapel was almost empty. "It's time to go to the notary," he said. "The reading of the will is scheduled for 4 o'clock." I nodded, taking one last look at the coffin. Strangely, I didn't feel Iris was here. Perhaps because she had spent most of her life not in the church, but in the library, in the garden, in our house. That's where her spirit remained, her presence. Not here, among the cold white lilies and formal speeches. The Baxter's notary office was in the center of town, in an old columned building. When Percy and I entered, Paxton and Lauren were already there, Dexter and a few other people I hadn't expected to see, Dottie, Iris's sister, whom they hadn't spoken to in years, and a young woman, probably her daughter, Iris's niece. Hamish Baxter, an elderly notary with a neat gray beard, greeted everyone and motioned for them to sit down. I noticed Paxton's tense expression, as if preparing for battle. "We are here to read Iris Frawley Thorpe's last will and testament," Baxter began in a formal tone. The document was drawn up 3 years ago and duly witnessed. He opened the folder, put on his glasses, and began to read. "I, Iris Frawley Thorpe, being of sound mind and sound judgment, make my last will and testament regarding the disposition of my estate at my death." Then came the standard legal language. I listened half listening, thinking about the fact that Iris had been sitting here, in this very office, 3 years ago, planning what would happen after her death, taking care of a future she would no longer have. "To my beloved husband, Garland James Thorpe, I leave the house number 17 Maple Street in the city of Warrensburg, which I purchased before my marriage, with all its contents, as well as all my savings and accounts at the First National Bank of Warrensburg and the stock in Bloomfield Pharmaceuticals inherited from my parents." I shuddered. The house on Maple. But we lived in my house on Elm. Iris was renting out the Maple house. It was her source of extra income. I had no idea she had stock. She never talked about it. Paxton straightened, his face a mixture of surprise and indignation. He clearly hadn't expected this either. "To my sister, Dorothy Dottie Frawley Hammond, I leave my mother's china collection and $10,000. Dottie sobbed quietly. She and Iris hadn't spoken in about 5 years because of some family quarrel that Iris didn't like to remember. "To my niece, Abigail Hammond, I leave my collection of art books and $5,000 for her education." The young woman, Abigail, looked surprised. Apparently she too had not expected an inheritance from an aunt with whom she barely spoke. To Dexter Thorpe, Paxton's son, I leave my pocket watch that belonged to my father. Dexter has always admired them, and I know he will value them not for their material value, but for the history they hold. Dexter smiled weakly. I remembered how, as a teenager, he had loved looking at that watch, asking about its history. Iris had always answered his questions with patience and love. To Paxton Thorpe, my husband's son, I do not leave material possessions, as I know he will not accept them from me. Instead, I leave him a letter which I ask the notary to deliver to him personally after the reading of the will. Paxton snorted as if to confirm her words. Indeed, he would accept nothing from her. I leave the remainder of my estate, including personal effects, furniture, and art, to my husband, Garland Thorpe, with full discretion to dispose of them as he sees fit. Baxter closed the folder and removed his glasses. This concludes the reading of Iris Frawley Thorpe's will. Are there any questions? Paxton raised his hand like a schoolboy. I'd like to know how much money we're talking about when it says savings and shares. Baxter looked at me as if asking for permission. I nodded. I was curious too. According to the last statement, Mrs. Thorpe has $243,000 in her accounts, the notary said. As for the shares of Bloomfield Pharmaceuticals, their current value is about $370,000. The house on Maple Street is valued at about $200,000. I felt my jaw drop. Over $800,000. Iris? My Iris, who had always lived modestly, worked as a librarian for a small salary, never spent money on luxuries. Paxton looked as if he had been struck. He shifted his gaze from the notary to me and back again. That's impossible, he muttered. She was a librarian. Where did she get that kind of money? Mrs. Thorpe inherited the stock from her parents, Baxter explained. Her father was one of the early investors in Bloomfield Pharmaceuticals. As for savings, she was a very thrifty person and invested her money wisely. I remembered how Iris always kept a close eye on the family budget, how she was able to find good deals, how happy she was when she could save money. But I had no idea of the extent of her fortune. She never talked about it. If there are no other questions, Baxter continued, I would like to give Mr. Paxton Thorpe a letter from the deceased, as stated in the will. He took an envelope from the folder and handed it to Paxton. He took it reluctantly, as if he was afraid the envelope would bite. You can read it here or take it with you, the notary said. It's a personal message, not part of a formal will. Paxton turned the envelope in his hands, then opened it decisively. He pulled out several sheets of paper, written in Iris's neat handwriting. I watched his face as he read. First disbelief, then surprise, then shock, and finally a pallor that spread over his cheeks like white paint. He raised his eyes, looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of fear, shame, and some terrible understanding. Is it true? He asked in a hoarse voice, shaking the letter. I didn't know what Iris had written to him. I didn't know what truth he was talking about, but I could see that the letter had shaken him to the core. I don't know what it says, Paxton, I answered honestly. He stood up, clutching the letter in his hand. I need to think, he mumbled and walked quickly out of the office without looking at anyone. Lauren followed him with an apologetic look. Dexter stayed behind, looking confused. What happened? He asked, turning to me. What was in that letter? I don't know, son, I answered. I haven't the faintest idea. After the reading of the will, Percy drove me home. I sat in the car, stunned by what had happened. Over $800,000, a house I never knew I had, and that letter that had so shaken Paxton. Are you okay? Percy asked, stopping in front of my house. I don't know, I answered honestly. Too many things all at once. Do you want me to come in with you? He offered. You shouldn't be alone right now. I shook my head. Thanks, man, but I need to be alone. Digest all this. Percy nodded understandingly. Call me any time if you need me. I thanked him and got out of the car. Our house, my house, looked the same as it always had. But now I knew I, had another house, and enough money to not have to worry about the future for the rest of my life. Once inside, the first thing I did was head to the kitchen and pour myself a whiskey. Without diluting it, I took a big gulp, feeling the liquid burn my throat. Iris didn't approve of hard alcohol, but today was a special day. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where Iris and I had breakfast every morning. She was always up early, making coffee, toast with jam. Good morning, sleepyhead, she'd say when I finally came downstairs, sleepy and grumpy. What was in that letter? What had shaken Paxton so much? As if in answer to my thoughts, the doorbell rang. It was sharp, insistent. I got up reluctantly. If it was some well-wisher with condolences and a casserole, I'd just slam the door in his face. On the threshold stood Paxton, pale, red-rimmed eyes, clutching a familiar envelope in his hand. "May I come in?" he asked, and there was none of his usual arrogance in his voice. I stepped back silently, letting him into the house. He walked into the living room and stopped by the fireplace looking at the pictures on the shelf. Many of them were of Iris. "Is that true?" he asked without turning around. "What she wrote. Is it true?" "I don't know what she wrote, Paxton," I answered, closing the door. "But Iris never lied. At least not to me." He turned to me and I saw in his eyes the pain he'd hidden all these years. She wrote that she was there," he said quietly. "The day Mom died. She was there for me. I froze. I didn't expect that." "What?" "She was a nurse," Paxton continued, looking at the letter in his hand. "Before she was a librarian. Drove by our house, saw you running out, screaming for help. She stopped, went inside, found Mom on the floor, and you, trying CPR. I leaned against the wall, feeling my legs shaken. That day, the terrible day that changed our lives forever. I remembered it in fragments. Elaine, suddenly clutching her chest, her pale face, my clumsy attempts to help, the call to the ambulance and the waiting, the endless waiting when every second stretched into eternity. But I didn't remember Iris. I didn't remember the other woman in the house. She says she tried to help. Paxton's voice shook. Checked your pulse, took over the CPR from you. But it was too late. Mom was already dead. A massive heart attack, almost instantaneous death. No one could have saved her, even if there had been a fully equipped operating room nearby. I closed my eyes, trying to remember. Some woman did show up before the ambulance arrived. I was in such shock that I barely paid attention to her. She said something in a professional tone, checking on Elaine, and then she disappeared when the paramedics showed up. Was that Iris? I asked, opening my eyes. That woman? Paxton nodded. She writes that she didn't tell you who she was when you met in the library 2 years later. Didn't want your relationship to start with such a terrible memory. She planned to tell you later, but the moment never came. And then she found out that I blamed you for Mom's death, and she realized that her testimony could change everything. He sank into the chair, still clutching the letter. But she didn't tell. Not to you, not to me. Why? I sat across from him, trying to comprehend what I was hearing. I guess she was afraid you wouldn't believe it, I suggested. You'd think she'd made up the story to justify me. I would have thought so, Paxton admitted bitterly, then. But there were details in the letter that only I knew. How Mom was dressed, what she said before she fell. Iris couldn't have made it up. I remembered that day. Elaine in the blue dress with white flowers, her favorite. How she said, "Garland, I don't feel well," and clutching her chest. How she fell to the kitchen floor, knocking over a chair. She's not lying, I said quietly. I don't remember her there, but It was the worst day of my life. I don't remember much of it clearly. Paxton looked up at me with a look full of pain. All these years, I blamed you. Thought you didn't do enough to save her. And then you found her replacement so quickly. 2 years isn't that fast, I argued tiredly. And Iris was never a replacement for your mother. She was a different person, someone I came to love in a different way. I know, he lowered his head. I know it now. She writes about it too, about how you talked about your mom, how you kept her pictures, how sometimes you called her name in your sleep. I felt tears coming to my eyes. Iris never reproached me for that, never jealous of Elaine's memory, realized my heart was big enough to hold love for both of them. That's not all. Paxton turned the page of the letter. She knew about my financial problems, about going into debt trying to impress my bosses to maintain a certain standard of living. I frowned. That was something I definitely didn't know about. What kind of problems? 3 years ago, I'd taken out a loan to buy a new house in an upscale neighborhood, then another one for a car. Then the stock I invested in fell apart. I was on the verge of bankruptcy, he admitted. Lauren didn't know. Nobody knew. I was going to sell the house, start over. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Suddenly I got a call from some lawyer. Said an anonymous benefactor wanted to help me with my debts, pay off some of the loan, no strings attached. I said no at first. Then I agreed when he assured me that the benefactor would never reveal himself or ask for anything in return. Iris, I guessed. It was Iris. Paxton nodded. She wrote that she had learned of my troubles by chance from a mutual acquaintance. She couldn't stand by when her stepson was in trouble. She paid almost $100,000 to help me, money she'd been saving up all her life. I shook my head, amazed. Iris had never mentioned it to me, never hinted that she was helping Paxton. Perhaps she was afraid I'd tell him and he'd refuse to help out of pride. She wrote that she loved me. Paxton's voice trembled. Not as a son, she knew I would never accept her in that role, but as a part of you, as someone who was important to her husband, and she wanted us to have a normal relationship, for your sake. I remembered how Iris always asked about Paxton even though he ignored her, how she sent cards on his birthday, how she made his favorite Thanksgiving apple pie even though she knew he wouldn't come. She was an amazing woman, I said quietly. Much better than I deserved. Than we both deserved, Paxton corrected, and there was remorse in his voice. She writes that she doesn't blame me for hating her. She understands my pain. All she asks is that I let you attend her funeral, so you can say goodbye. He looked up at me in shame, and I refused her even that, her last request. We sat in silence for a while. I tried to make sense of everything I'd learned today. Iris helping a son who hated her. Iris hiding her wealth, living modestly. Iris witnessing Elaine's death. How many more secrets did she take with her? There's more, Paxton said, flipping through the pages of the letter. She writes about the house on Maple, the one she left you. Did you know about it? I shook my head. Only that she was renting it out, making a small income. She bought it 22 years ago, Paxton said, the year before Mom died. Planned to open a private daycare center there. Always wanted to work with children. I frowned. We'd met when Iris was already working at the library. She'd never mentioned her dream of opening a daycare center. Why didn't she do it? She writes that when she met you, her priorities changed. Paxton turned the page. She realized that a daycare center would require all her time and energy, and she wanted to devote herself to her family, to you. I felt a lump come up in my throat. Iris gave up her dream for me, and she never said anything about it, never rebuked me, never even hinted at it. For the last few years, she'd been renting the house to a family with 3 children, Paxton continued, way below market value. She refused to raise the rent when she could have gotten twice as much. Said it was more important to have happy children in the house. That was so Iris. Kindness without show, caring without expecting gratitude. I didn't know, I said, feeling my voice shake. She never talked about the house, about the money, about her dream. There's something else here. Paxton pulled a second piece of paper from the envelope. Not part of the letter, a list, to the people she'd helped. He held the paper out to me. I ran my eyes over the lines. The Martins family, medical bills for their daughter, Old Man Thompson, roof repairs, the animal shelter, monthly donations, and about a dozen other names and organizations. I didn't know, I repeated, feeling the tears running down my cheeks. She never said, "She wrote that she didn't want you to know," Paxton said quietly. "Afraid you'd feel embarrassed that she was richer than you, that it would hurt your pride." And she was right. I've always been an old-school man who believed a man should provide for his family. If I had known about her condition, maybe it would have hurt my pride. Maybe I'd feel inadequate around her. "What are you going to do with the house?" Paxton asked. I shrugged my shoulders. "I don't know. Maybe I'll keep renting it to the same family. Maybe I'll open a daycare center like she wanted." "That's what she'd want," Paxton nodded. "She wrote in her letter that she hoped you'd find a way to use the house to bring joy to the children." We were silent again. It was beginning to get dark outside the window. The day was coming to an end. A day that had begun with a funeral and ended with discoveries that had changed the way I thought about the woman I'd lived with for 20 years. "I have to go," Paxton finally said, rising. "Lauren and the kids are waiting." I nodded, standing up as well. "Thank you for coming, for showing me the letter." He looked at me for a long moment. "I should have talked to you a long time ago, 20 years ago, but pride, resentment, they clouded my eyes." "I understand," I said. "Losing a mother is a terrible blow to a child, even if that child is in his 20s. It doesn't excuse the way I acted with you. With Iris," he lowered his eyes. "She deserved better. You both did." When he left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching his car disappear into the twilight. Strangely, I didn't feel angry with him, only tiredness and sadness at the lost years we could have spent as a family. I walked back into the living room, sitting down in Iris's chair. It still held the shape of her body, as if she had just gotten up. On the table next to it was the book she'd been reading before she went into the hospital, some kind of detective novel. The bookmark was still on page 146. She would never know how the story ended. The house was full of her things, her smell, her presence, and empty at the same time because she herself was no longer here. Never would be. I got up, walked to the kitchen. I opened the cabinet where Iris kept her tea, dozens of boxes of different kinds. I picked out her favorite, bergamot. I brewed a cup and returned to the living room. Sitting in silence, I thought about the woman I thought I knew so well, about her secrets, her sacrifices, her kindness, about how many things she did in the shadows without expecting thanks or recognition. "You were too good for this world, Iris," I thought, looking at her picture on the mantelpiece, "and definitely too good for a grumpy old man like me." And it seemed to me that somewhere in the silence of the house, I heard her quiet laugh, warm, slightly husky, so familiar, as if she disagreed, as if she wanted to tell me that I was exactly who she had wanted to be around all these years. It was 3 weeks after Iris's funeral. July brought a stifling heat to Warrensburg that no air conditioning or fans could escape. I spent my days in the house, sorting through Iris's things, reading books she hadn't finished, trying to understand the woman I'd lived with for 20 years and who, as it turned out, held so many secrets. The second week I visited the house on Maple Street, a small but cozy 2-story cottage with a spacious garden. I met the tenants, a young couple with 3 children. They were horrified, thinking I would put them out, but I assured them that the terms of the lease remained the same. Saw the playground that Iris had installed in the garden at her own expense. Swings, a sandpit, a little house. Mrs. Thorpe always said the children are the most important thing. Sarah, the mother of the family, told me. I also met with the attorney who was helping Iris with her charity. I learned that she regularly visited a children's cancer center, reading books to young patients, that she funded a scholarship for gifted children from low-income families, that she helped a homeless animal shelter, saving dozens of dogs and cats from being put to sleep. All of this she did quietly, without publicity. Never mentioned it at home. Why brag about something you just have to do, she liked to say. One night I got a call from Dexter, asked how I was doing, offered to help, said his dad hadn't been himself lately. Quiet, brooding, spends a lot of time in his office going through old photographs. I didn't mention the contents of Iris's letter. That was Paxton's business. At the end of the third week, on Saturday, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors. I'd had a few visits since the funeral. Percy, Edith, a couple of Iris's colleagues from the library. But the phone had been silent the last few days, and no one had knocked on the door, for which I was grateful. I needed to be alone. Opening the door, I saw Paxton. He stood on the threshold, shuffling nervously from foot to foot, a bottle of whiskey in his hands. "May I come in?" he asked without greeting. I stepped back, letting him into the house. We hadn't seen or spoken since our last conversation on the day of the funeral. He looked gaunt, with shadows under his eyes. I guess the shock of Iris's letter hadn't worn off. "Brought you a drink," he said, holding out the bottle. "Thought we could use one." I nodded, accepting the offering. Expensive scotch, 12 years old. Paxton always liked quality stuff, often unaffordable. "Come into the kitchen," I offered, "or the living room." "The kitchen's fine," he said. "It's cozier." We went into the kitchen. I took out 2 glasses and poured us both a drink. We sat down at the table, which still had the tablecloth Iris had chosen, a small floral pattern. "How are you?" Paxton asked, taking a sip. "I'm hanging in there," I answered honestly. "Sometimes better, sometimes worse. How about you?" He twirled the glass in his hands, looking at the amber liquid. "I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of everything. What Iris wrote, the way I've behaved all these years. We didn't talk." Through the open window came the chirping of cicadas and the distant barking of the neighbor's dog, the usual sounds of a summer evening that Iris liked to listen to while sitting on the porch. "I visited the house on Maple," I said, breaking the silence. "Met the tenants. Nice family." Paxton nodded. "What do you plan to do with it?" "I haven't decided yet," I shrugged. "Maybe I'll actually open a children's center or something, fulfill her dream." "That would be good." He took another sip. "She loved kids. Always treated mine well. Even when I was what I was." I remembered how Iris always bought gifts for her grandchildren for all the holidays, even though she was rarely able to give them in person. How she'd asked about them, rejoiced in their successes, even though she knew about them only from Dexter's rare stories. "Iris was special," I said quietly. "Better than most of us." Paxton nodded, looking into his glass. "I didn't deserve a stepmother like that," he said bitterly, "nor a father like that." I looked up, surprised by his words. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath as if gathering his strength. "I never told you what happened that day, when Mom died." I froze. In 23 years, we'd never once talked about that day. It was too painful a topic for both of us. "You were in college," I said carefully. "Came up for the weekend." "Yes," he nodded. "But for a reason. I failed 2 exams. I skipped half the semester, drinking, partying, spending your money on stupid things." I frowned. I didn't know about that. Elaine had never told me Paxton was in trouble in college. "Mom found out," he continued. "I don't know how, maybe someone in the administration called. She met me with a serious talk. Said if I didn't get my act together, she and you would stop paying for college." He paused, taking another sip of whiskey. I had a temper, said some terrible things, that she's controlling me, that I'm an adult and I'll decide my own life, that she didn't care about my dreams and desires, that she was only thinking about her ambitions for me. I listened, amazed. Elaine had never told me about this fight. Perhaps she wanted to keep me from being disappointed in my son, or perhaps she hoped to resolve it herself. It was a terrible fight. Paxton's voice shook. I screamed. She was crying. At one point I said I'd rather she died than continue to ruin my life with her demands. He closed his eyes, his face contorted with the pain of the memory. And an hour later, she did die. Caught her heart right in the kitchen while you and I were in the living room. You ran to her, tried to help her, and I just stood there, unable to move, knowing it was my fault. My words, my anger, had triggered the attack. I shook my head, feeling the lump in my throat. Paxton, it's not your fault. Your mother had congenital heart failure. The doctors said it could have happened at any time. But it happened right when I wished her dead. He looked up at me with a look of lingering pain. Do you understand? I literally killed her with my words. No, I shook my head firmly. You didn't kill her. The fight might have been the trigger, but the attack would have come sooner or later. Maybe from another stressor, from physical exertion, just in her sleep. Paxton was silent for a long time, staring out the window. Then he spoke again, quietly, almost in a whisper. It was easier to blame you, to think you didn't do enough to save her. That if you'd called an ambulance sooner, started CPR sooner, she might have survived. I understand, I said softly. Sometimes it's easier to direct anger outward than to admit your own guilt, even if it's not really your fault. And then Iris showed up, he continued, and I hated her instantly, not because she took Mom's place, but because she made you happy, that you were able to move on, to love again, whereas I was stuck in that day, that fight, that nightmare. I never looked at the situation that way. I'd always thought Paxton was jealous of my mother's memory, thought I'd betrayed her by marrying again. But that wasn't the point. It was about his own guilt, his own grief, which he could not cope with. Now Iris's letter, he said, pouring himself another whiskey. She was there, saw you trying to save your mom, confirmed that there was no chance. It was like it took some of the guilt off me. And at the same time, it showed me how awful I've been all these years. To you, to her. You were a child who lost his mother, I said. Wounded, confused. We all do stupid things when we're hurt. I was 22, he countered, not 12. I should have handled it better. Supported you, not blamed you. Accept Iris, not reject her. I remembered Paxton from those days, fiery, emotional, always ready to challenge authority. That's how he was before his mother died. He was still like that, only with the added bitterness of loss and guilt. 22 is still very young, I said, especially for this kind of trauma. We were silent again. I thought about the years spent in feuds, in grudges, in misunderstandings, how Iris had tried to build a bridge between us, not knowing the real cause of the rift, how she secretly helped Paxton, knowing that open help would be rejected. What about your financial problems? I asked. The ones Iris wrote about, are they solved? Paxton wrinkled his nose. Partially. Her help saved me from bankruptcy, but I still have debts. I took on too much, trying to impress. New house, car, private school for the kids, all to look like a successful deputy mayor. Why didn't you come to me? I asked. I could have helped. He grinned bitterly. Pride, what else? I spent 20 years pretending you were nothing to me. How could I come and ask you for money? I nodded understandingly. Paxton had always been proud, even as a child. Never asked for help. He preferred to do things on his own, even if it meant getting a few bumps in the road. What about you and Lauren? I asked, remembering what Dexter had said about his parents' problems. Paxton sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Not great. We estranged. I'm at work all the time. She's busy with the kids. When we're together, we either don't talk or we fight. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. Lauren's a good woman. Yeah, he nodded. Too good for me. Just like Iris was too good for both of us. He looked at me with a new honesty in his gaze. You know, I was always jealous of you and Iris, the way you were together, even when you were doing ordinary things like cooking dinner or working in the garden. You could always tell that you were good together, that you were on the same page. I smiled, remembering our quiet evenings together, when she'd read and I'd do crossword puzzles, our Sunday walks in the park, our arguments about politics, about books, about what kind of tomatoes to plant this year. We had our problems, I said, but we knew how to talk, compromise. Iris was a master at it. Lauren and I had lost it, Paxton admitted, or never really knew how. I thought about it, looking at my son. Despite his outward success, his position in society, he looked lost. A man who had achieved everything he wanted and found that it didn't make him happy. It's not too late to learn, I said. Trust an old man who realized a lot of things too late. As long as you both want to keep the family together, there's a chance. Paxton nodded, looking thoughtfully into his glass. Maybe you're right. Maybe we should try therapy or something. That's a good idea, I agreed. Neutral territory where you can speak up without fear of being judged. We fell silent again, but the silence wasn't tense. It was more pensive, filled with thoughts of the past and possible futures. I miss her, Paxton said suddenly. My mom. I still do. It's been years and I still miss her. Me too, I said quietly. Every day. And Iris now too. How are you doing? He asked, looking at me with genuine interest. With loss. Twice, I wondered. How am I coping? I live day by day. I remember the good things. I let myself be sad when things get unbearable. I don't know if I'm coping, I answered honestly. I just move on. Because that's what they'd both want. For me to live, not exist in the past. Paxton nodded, understanding. I've been stuck in the past for 20 years, he said. That fight, that day, maybe it's time to move on, like you did. It's never too late, I said, reaching out and touching his shoulder lightly. And you're not alone. You have a family, Lauren, the kids, and me, if you want me to. He looked up at me and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years, a glimpse of the boy I'd once taught to ride a bike, to cast a fishing rod, to tie a tie. I want to, he said quietly. If you can forgive me for all these years. I forgave you long ago, I replied, tears welling up in my eyes, just waiting for you to be ready to come back. We sat in the kitchen until late at night. We talked about the past, not just the painful moments, but the happy ones as well. Elaine teaching Paxton how to bake cookies from his grandmother's recipe. The fishing trips we went on every summer. College, Paxton's first job, the birth of his children. We talked about the present, his job at City Hall, my plans for the house on Maple, Dexter going to medical school. We talked about the future, uncertain, but including both of us for the first time in a long time. Maybe family dinners on Sundays, perhaps a vacation together next summer, perhaps new traditions to replace lost ones. By the time Paxton got ready to leave, it was well past midnight. We stood at the door and there was something awkward about that goodbye. Too much said, too much changed in one evening. Thank you, he said, holding out his hand, for listening, for not kicking me out. I ignored the hand and hugged him, first time in 20 years. He tensed for a moment, then relaxed, hugging back. Come over next Saturday for dinner, I said, letting him go. With Lauren and the kids. I'll cook something. Are you sure? He looked unsure. We can go to a restaurant. You don't need to. I want to, I interrupted. A family dinner, at home, like we used to. He nodded, smiling weakly. Okay, 6 o'clock? 6, I confirmed. And tell Dexter to come too, with a friend if he wants. After he left, I sat on the porch for a long time, looking up at the stars. The night was warm, filled with the chirping of cicadas and the scent of the jasmine Iris had planted under the windows. I thought about our conversation with Paxton, about the confession, about the possibility of a fresh start. Not a clean slate that was impossible after so many years of resentment and estrangement, but at least a new page, given the mistakes of the past. I thought of Iris, of her last letter, the one that had done what she and I had failed to do in 20 years, to make Paxton see the truth, about her quiet kindness that had continued to work wonders even after her death. You were always smarter than all of us, dear, I thought, looking up at the stars. Even now you have found a way to heal our family. And I thought the warm night breeze that touched my cheek was her answer.